Hello, everybody. Let's talk about my performance at the Missouri Show Me State Games this year in 2023. I talked about how I got 2 gold medals in kata, or empty hand forms, and weapons kata, or weapons forms. So let's move on to the sparring. So I'm waiting for the sparring to begin, and I just noticed the judging here is very different. I did some judging myself for weapons, forms, and fighting, mostly with the younger kids. And I observed, our younger age bracket black belts. Again, there was no other black belt in the 12 to 15 range, and that we had the 16-year-old, so they were sisters, and they made them spar together. Maybe there was one other young female black belt. I don't know if I saw her, but their match stood out. They were both ATA black belts, both really good. They did fantastic in weapons and forms. And I want to add, when I was in the ATA, we didn't have a weapons program. I'm that old. I did it from 89 to about 91. And the only reason I stopped is because I was discharged from the military. ATA is a very expensive organization. You got to spend a lot of money for every little step. But it's a lot of fun, and it's a fantastic looking style. And you learn many things, and apparently you learn more. Now you learn weapons. Their match was filled with spinning hook kicks, axe kicks. Not a lot of punching to be expected, taekwondo. Some punching, I think. But it was a spectacular match, and I felt like a lot just wasn't getting scored, right? And I don't think it was fair to them. But again, I heard a lot of judges talk about, well, maybe I shouldn't judge. This one's my student. The other one's like, well, your student's form and your weapons, you can better judge them. So they kind of have very different concept of what objectivity is here. I see the Show Me State Games right now as being dominated by about 2 schools. It's almost like their personal little fiefdom. They have very, very little input from outside. And again, it may have been different in the past. So it came time to spar, and first the younger black belts went. And one thing I'm going to say I absolutely didn't like, there was this big, tall, young fella, maybe 19, 20, in that range. And I felt like a little light tapping kick, tap, 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 on my side as I was sitting down. He's like, hey, buddy, you got to move. We need this for fighting. I'm like, okay. He knows I'm a black belt. He's watched the black belt competition. He was competing in front of the same judges, just a little bit before my age bracket went up. And he knows that I'm now a champion in kata and forms by his judges, by his teachers. He should have never done that. If he would have done that around the time in the 80s when I came up, or in the 70s, or even a little bit of the 90s, it would have been a fight right in there on the tournament floor. And I didn't want to go there because it's Gen Z. They kind of don't know a lot about a lot. So I said, okay. I stood up, and I just lightly picked up my knee and did 2 front kicks with the ball of my foot on the side of his thighs, and I walked off, very light. And I don't know if he got the message or if he's like, I should kick that guy's ass. Again, this would have not flown at any other point in history on the American tournament scene, and I don't know what Missouri was like back then. But Missouri is very isolated, and there's many informalities. The style they practice is sort of a composite of Okinawan and other styles. So I'm actually going to send an email to that home dojo about that and say, hey, this is probably something you should discontinue. Again, I don't know how traditional your dojo is or what your customs and courtesies are, but it's generally something you wouldn't even do to a white belt. Okay, you've got words. You can even tap someone on the shoulder. Excuse me. Even like man is better than hey buddy. All right, gotta move. We need this ring to fight. Generally in martial arts, I've always been taught, if you're doing in a formal situation, excuse me, sir, we need this to fight. Excuse me, ma'am, right? And I know gender pronouns are a thing. I really don't get into that. So it came down to fight. I did point sparring. I'm going to say, again, I look like a fool point sparring because it is quite possibly one of the dumbest fight formats around. It was adopted from fencing and later judo, from kendo. Most of the Chinese and Okinawan styles want to fight continuously in clinch range, and it basically incentivizes darting in as fast as possible and darting out or running, or huge lunging attacks from a distance, which I normally would never use. I've sparred all kinds of people, full contact, semi-contact, but in continuous formats. I almost never get hit with side kicks, but I'm forced to lunge in at long range because the clock is running out and I've been scored on. And so, I was getting hit with side kicks, which, again, it's a fighting style I normally wouldn't use. He got me 5-3. I'm glad I didn't get completely shut out. He's 10 years younger, all right? And competes, not only in this event every year, but he competes in all the Missouri local tournaments. And, I think he runs a school. So definitely had a huge advantage, especially considering I had no one to spar with. So what can I say about that? You need to spar if you're going to compete in the sport format. I was in shape. I didn't get tired in any of the events. I had plenty of energy, full range of motion. I did feel a little bit heavy on my feet bouncing back and forth because I had no one to bounce back and forth with. Closest thing I had was some heavy bag work at Crunch Gym, doing rounds of kickboxing. So the cardio aspect, the conditioning aspect, the stretching aspect, all of that worked, but you need to spar. And if you don't have someone to spar with, it shows. That being said, 5-3, again, 10 years younger, this guy competes all the time. I don't feel that bad about it. And because we were in different age brackets, okay, I now have a gold medal in point sparring at the Show Me State Games. So these are my 3 gold medals. And again, there was nobody there my age, so I kind of don't have competition. If you're in my age bracket and you're healthy enough to compete in these things, especially if if it's not like New York City or something, you have an incentive to go. You have a chance to do something. To be honest with you, I've won golds in weapons and kata, weapons and forms, sometimes at the same event. I've never gotten higher than a bronze in point sparring. I mean, I have sparred people that point spar in the gym according to full contact and continuous rules, and after the first 2-minute round, I generally dominate them because they're just not used to this format of fighting, even if I'm not going hard or not. I've had sparring sessions. There was a place called the Authentic School of Karate in Chesapeake. The son of the main instructor was, a regional, state, and national point fighting champion. We had a sparring session that got ugly, and he started kicking me really hard in the head. And so I did a straight blast on him, put him against the mirrors, and, beat him into the mirror. And then the other black belt separated us. That's happened to me several times. So different formats, you have to have different attributes, okay? And granted, I was younger then. I was in my 20s. But I think I've won. The one time that I won 1 or 2 point sparring matches in my life was at AAU Karate, Amateur Athletic Union in New Jersey. And at the time, I got ranked fourth in the state for that. All right, and they do spar a little bit differently in the AAU. That's closer to traditional karate style back then. Nowadays, they're kind of bouncing around and lunging in, and they call it Olympic style now. But I would say if you're going to compete at this age, you're probably better off competing in a very traditional format without the bouncing and lunging, because I think that a little bit more favors traditional style martial art. Okay, let's see. I struck up some conversations with people there. There was one black belt, Barbara. She was the female I competed against for weapons and kata. Very nice lady, very skilled. Again, in her age bracket, very skilled and very friendly. And I noticed the women there, black belts and otherwise, just love my kata and my form, and they just came up and talked to me. And one of them was like, "Can I sit next to you?" And I'm like, "Sure, ma'am. It's not my floor." "Well, you're a black belt." Like, they were very courteous and they admired my kata. They wanted to talk about it. They wanted to talk about my forms. They were impressed with my breathing. I think a lot of the men black belts from the traditional karate styles didn't know what to make of me. And I felt a kinship with the ATA people because I had a black belt with them. I talked with their parents, their uncles and cousins, and they were all Indian Americans, so they were all very educated, very nice. And talked about, the ATA was a very positive influence in my life. When I was in the Marine Corps from 88 to 92, the ATA was such an outlet for me. It helped me maintain my sanity. Taekwondo, I said, saved my life. If I hadn't been doing Taekwondo at the Windansea Athletic Center under Mr. John Alfred Schwabler and gang, I think I would have gone nuts. It gave me an athletic pursuit, helped me stay in shape aside from my PT. It helped me get aggressions out by giving me sparring. It helped me artistically express myself. It gave me a step ladder of rank to go up to that was far more objective than the military ranking structure that I was surrounded by. I had really bad leadership in the Marine Corps throughout my career. I had really good instructorship, more or less, throughout my ATA career at the time, and things were different then. So I felt a kinship with these people. I talked to these people. I helped them out. They had some questions about, they do their own format of competition, and I helped talk to the two girls about it. I said, well, for example, you don't want to complain to the judges as you're standing there. You want to wait till all the competitors get their turn and you raise your hand. And I said, if you have an objection, those people in the T-shirts are all part of the Show Me State Games judging. Like, they're there to oversee. Talk to them if you feel like you're being done unfairly. So I felt that was very positive. There was one other guy there. It was kind of cool. He had like a Billy Jack hat on, and he was a couple of years younger than me, but he had multiple problems, just had knee replacement surgeries. He was taking a bunch of pills and medicine, and he had a Filipino martial art background. It was from, I think, Warrior Martial Arts somewhere here in Missouri, and we resonated a bit, especially after he saw me perform. And he talked about some of the differences in competition. And I said, yeah, all my sparring formats have been continuous, and I haven't had anybody to spar with in years. I trained all on my own. Negative talk, negative experience. The young guy who kicked me, albeit lightly, say, hey, buddy, we need this ring to compete. That just doesn't float. That's horrible. That's call it a black mark on your martial arts competition. I am going to talk to your school. Even if you're the one in charge, you're getting an email about that. It's only fair. I'm doing you a service by telling you not to do that anymore. If you would do that on the East Coast with some of the martial arts schools that are predominantly black and Latino, you would get your ass whooped. There would be a dojo war right there on the spot. I'm saving your life if you ever decide to go national. There was a big black belt there named Jamel, who, a huge guy. He looks like a gorilla. I mean, he's got to be close to 300 pounds. Most of it's solid. I've seen him at Crunch Gym. He's Egyptian American by background, and I think a retired cop. He mentioned that. When it was all over, I asked him what my score was. He confirmed what the Billy Jack guy said. He said it was 5-3. And I said, yeah, I had nobody to spar with. I had nobody to train with. And he says, well, maybe you could try. He's an Egyptian guy who tries to talk like upper crust white guy, if you could imagine, but he's built like a gorilla. Well, you could try our Shorin-ryu, we use the right body mechanics. And, I'm like, right away when I hear that, it's a dog whistle, because most karate guys do not understand Kung Fu body mechanics. He said body mechanics, not dynamics. And what I'm going to say is, if you watched my Hungar form, you should have seen every single body mechanic that's used in Shorin-ryu and Shotokan, plus more. If you didn't, if that's why you gave me a 9.8 instead of a 9.9, you're not a competent judge of this style. Okay, you are not competently judging my style. And what often happens with karate people is when they see Kung Fu, they say it's the soft style. They call it that for some reason. Therefore, they have inferior body mechanics. They don't hit as hard, which is completely untrue. Okay, and he's like, you could try our Shorin-ryu. I did 20 years police, or 20 or 15 years police, and I've never had an incident that lasted more than a few seconds. We say if an incident lasts more than 10 seconds, you're doing it wrong. And I said, that's an ideal fantasy world. The real world is different. Well, I don't know. In my whole entire career, just one hit and a takedown, that's usually all it takes. And I said, you're a gorilla. I said this out loud. Dude, you're a gorilla. Well, it's all about the... I'm like, you're a gorilla. You're huge. Right? And the conversation went on a bit, but this dude is bigger than most athletic Americans can get, or want to get. Most of his success is genetics, powerlifting, and protein. Okay, he could have used the body mechanics of a ballerina, a badminton player, a jazz dancer, or a volleyball player, and had the same results throughout his entire career. And I suspect when he was younger, he was actually more muscular. Okay, even amongst muscular people, most people will not bother getting that big, or can't get that big. Okay, his legs are like tree trunks. Okay, they're certainly thicker than my legs, which are thicker than average. Maybe thicker, like a leg and a half of mine in thickness. Okay, and he's about 6 foot or close to it, maybe over it. I'm not that great at judging height because I'm always doing this. But if he thinks that body mechanics and his style played a role in his success, and he said something about the real world. If you're a cop and you're listening to this, you don't live in the real world. Most cops are blithely ignorant of how the real world works. Most of us do not have a gun on us, do not have qualified immunity. We do not have the radio, the backup, the baton, and often they wear a body vest, right? So body shots and weapons, a lot of that they're protected from. Most of what you're experiencing as a cop is you being shielded from aspects of the real world that we have to deal with. Jamel, if you're listening to this, I had to bounce guys your size out of clubs. Okay, and I didn't have qualified immunity like you did. And I didn't have 300 pounds. And I didn't have the height advantage and the reach advantage. I had to use body mechanics. I had to use also mental mechanics. I had to be very clever in how I talk to people. And so you've been bullshitting yourself all your life, dude. All right? And I've seen your class. I've seen your Shorin-ryu. You don't have anything to teach me in terms of body mechanics I don't already know. But I actually have body mechanics I can teach you that you don't know. Also, I'm going to say this. And again, don't take it as an insult, but you've been bullshitting yourself. For example, I watched you sort of shadow boxing and doing some fighting maneuvers. And when you punch, you don't punch like you do when your style practices. Karate people, yes, they use the hip vibration, and you'll see the shoulders locked completely square, body completely upright, chin up. When he was throwing his combinations, his shoulder extended, he turned at the waist. And I'm pretty sure if there was a person in front of him, there would be a little bit of inclination in his jabs and his crosses. And, he had his hands up in the boxing position. So again, whenever karate, taekwondo, and some kung fu people that do the square shoulder thing actually have to fight, particularly at a distance, they twist, they don't stop their rotation at square with the hips and square with the shoulders. They continue through the waist. The shoulder extends, and there's often inclination. That's what we do in Kung Fu. But when we do it in our forms, out of ignorance, many of you score us down. Believe it or not, that's how you punch harder. Look at boxers. Look at some guys that are really good in karate and taekwondo who break things with their hands. They rotate through, and there's often an inclination and a snap. I could teach you this, Gamel, or any karate guy, but I'm not going to do it for free. And because you'd be very hard to teach, I would have to charge you $200 an hour because you would be resistant to admitting the truth. That's just the way it is. Most people are very ignorant of other styles of martial art unless they've cross-trained, or They've gone to seminars, conversed, and things like that, which you obviously haven't. You know less about martial arts than you think you do. And here's another thing I'm going to say. You had one student, your daughter, compete in forms. She did not compete in fighting this year. She didn't compete in fighting last year. That's a personal preference. But none of your students did. And I suspect you're not very good at the point format of competition, especially if you're a 300-pound gorilla who basically is power-based. I have a strong suspicion that most of your students and yourself do not do point sparring, do not do the Show Me State games, and find the format kind of useless for what you do, which technically I do. But I will not judge a sport that I haven't educated myself in, participated in. I said, okay, I just competed in your forms format. I just competed in your weapons format. I feel comfortable judging. I said I can referee any fight. I've done refereed boxing, kickboxing, trained MMA people. I'm comfortable doing that. I said I'm not going to judge the underbelts. I'm not going to judge. I don't want to be the center ref. I was a side judge. I would call points. When it came to black belts, I said, well, let me spar this year. Let me see what happens. I feel comfortable judging now that I've competed in your format. I've talked to people. That's another reason why I did the point sparring. I think it's kind of silly. But people, if I was to show up to the Show Me State games and just do forms and weapons and not sparring, somebody could say he was afraid to fight, he couldn't fight. Missouri's motto is "We are the Show Me State," and these are called the Show Me State Games. So I went to show my style and show my legitimacy. In 2021, a national kung fu organization rated me 5th Tuan, like 5th degree black belt in their federation. My friend Jose Gonzalez, I have a certificate on the wall. Let's see if I can get you to see it. All right, by my door is a 7th Dan certificate in Goju Dao Te Karate Do. He recognized me. He trained my instructor, Jeff Mack, back in the 70s. And he's technically the Grandmaster. And he granted me a 7th Dan. And I said, because I'm not there to do a physical test, I will do this competition, Master Gonzalez, Grandmaster Gonzalez. Right? To validate both of those organizations' confidence in me. And what I know is there's nobody in my age group doing this. No one's competing. Most of them don't test for their ranks, their honorary ranks. They don't demonstrate for their rank. The late Grandmaster H.U. Lee, whose personal signature is on my black belt certificate for Sangam Taekwondo, when he got his, I think, 7th or 8th degree, he demonstrated. He was incredible. So I validated that experience. I showed you, Missouri. I showed you, and I showed you in all 3 categories that you deem relevant for a martial artist. And I have my 3 gold medals. Now, some people are like, well, if you show up and no one ever competes in your age bracket, first of all, I had to compete with someone in all 3 times. They were all exhibition competitions and an exhibition match. Is that a participation trophy? Well, I don't know. If I had competed in my age bracket and not done well and was given a participation trophy, that would be one thing. But if no one else is capable of doing what I'm doing, if no other man my age is capable of doing what I'm doing there and I'm doing it, it's more than participation. That's survival. And survival is a form of victory. I went to your house, Missouri, and local Missouri martial arts community. I went to your house. I did your thing under your rules, and your judges, you my peers, gave me 3 gold medals. And I validated myself. I didn't duck any event. I didn't duck any fighter or any competitor. And honestly, it's the first time in my life I've ever had first places in all 3 events. So in a sense, it's a personal best. It's a career peak. So what I would say is, if you're my age and if you're a traditional martial artist, at the very least, get back in training. If you don't want to compete, at the very least, expand your training, expand your knowledge, go to seminars if you don't want to go to tournaments. Just do kata if you don't want to spar. If you're a sparring guy, see if there's someone your age or close to it who'd be willing to do an exhibition match, maybe in a different format if you don't like point sparring. These all are possibilities, but don't give up, don't get on the couch, don't say, I'm done living, I'm done competing, I'm just going to see how fat I can get, or how many cigarettes I can smoke, or how much TV I can watch. That is not the way to go. Alright? You're going to get old. Life is going to move on, and eventually we will shuffle off this mortal coil, and you might as well live while you're living. Okay? Thank you very much. You all have a wonderful day.